What's up? Welcome in. Hoge and Jahns back with you, getting towards the end of January. Super Bowl matchup is set. Hope everybody had a great weekend. And the Bears have coordinators. Johnsy, how's it going?
It's Senior Bowl week. When's
Yeah.
the last time you went to the Senior Bowl? It's been a while for me.
Yeah, same. I stopped going to the Senior Bowl when I started going to the Super Bowl every year. So it's probably been 7 or 8 years.
When I first started, covering football, I would go from the NFC or AFC championship game, wherever that game was. I would cover that. And then the next morning, I would take connecting flights all the way down to Mobile, Alabama for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Not doing that anymore. Kevin Fishbane, though, is in Mobile, Alabama.
And then would you go to the Super Bowl the following week too?
I would.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I covered quite a few Super Bowls. Not doing that anymore. Although I do miss Super Bowl week. It's quite a long week, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, people always, they don't understand, like, when the season's over, it's not really over, especially when you cover the Bears. It's kind of like just getting started. So it's like, yeah, February is the month I'm not home at all. That's my travel month, because it's Super Bowl, at the combine, and then usually in there I take a vacation, which I will be doing this year again. So it's just like, yeah, it's and then this year we have a coaching search too, which happens every 3 years.
There was 1 year. I want to say it was John Fox's second year. Of course, they weren't good, bad team. You know the deal. So we're waiting for a flight. This time I don't have a connecting flight from whatever AFC NFC championship game. I'm going from Chicago to Mobile, and there's like one direct flight. So on this flight is all of the Bears staff, the front office, the coaches, and what have you. So in the small terminal, I think it's Terminal 2, where some of the smaller flights are. There's a bar down there. So I'm walking down there, and there's John Fox sitting at the bar. And I go, "Oh, hey, John, how's your off season going?" And he scolded me for calling it the off season since it was still during the season.
Yeah.
Well, be better.
Yeah. No, and that's honestly, that's how last year felt the entire time. Like, with the whole quarterback, Caleb Williams, Justin Fields stuff. This is not complaining. It's just explaining how the job works. It's fun. But yeah, haven't been in the Senior Bowl for a while. Kevin is down there, and you should be checking out everything he's got. We have our guy Fran Duffy down there for All City. He's doing some great stuff. So we'll catch up. Those practices haven't even started. The East-West Shrine game those practices have been ongoing. I think that game's Thursday night.
Yeah.
Right? It's weird how they cross over.
It's just the NFL world keeps spinning, man. It just keeps going.
Well, they've done a good job of that. That's for sure. And the coaching carousel. We're almost to the end of the head coaching cycle. There's only one job left. That happened fast. I was thinking the other day.
Right? The Saints are the only one left?
Yeah. I was thinking the other day, Johns, if the Lions hadn't lost to the Commanders, like, how everything could be different. Just like the trickle-down effect of events that can play out sometimes. I'm not saying the Bears would have gotten impatient and hired somebody else.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you.
I don't think so, but maybe another team would have hired somebody else than they ended up with, because of just the trickle-down effect of how it all ended up. It's just kind of weird. Also, the way that, like, the Eagles looked on Sunday, who knows? I kind of feel like the Eagles would have beaten the Lions anyway, but just where that Lions defense was. So maybe it would have been delayed a week. Regardless.
I like to believe that there is not a scenario where the Bears would have gotten impatient and hired Mike McCarthy last week as opposed to waiting out Ben Johnson.
I mean, everything we saw and heard last week at House Hall indicates that would not have been the case. Plus, Mike's not getting a job elsewhere right now, unless he's going to get the Saints job, which I guess is still a possibility. But it seems like they could have waited that one out.
What you might have gotten was that second round of interviews that never really happened.
Right.
Where candidates come to Hallis Hall and meet other staff members, but wasn't meant to be once the Lions lost.
Yeah, I'm working on kind of the final piece of my coaching project, which is just sort of comparing how the Bears operated this time around compared to the finalists they had in past years. And spoiler alert, the conclusion is just the whole pool of candidates was better this time and the way they handle it. But what's interesting is there's no finalists. There's no finalists to compare to the other finalists from the past year that were clearly defined. I still think, who would you say the four major players were? I would say they were. I would still say Vrabel, even though he was destined to go to the
100%.
Patriots. I think the Bears were 100% interested in him. I would say obviously Ben Johnson. I would say Mike McCarthy, and I might throw Pete Carroll in that mix too.
Maybe, but I think you have it right there. The top two candidates for Ben Johnson, Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel obviously got hired almost immediately as soon as the cycle opened by the New England Patriots. And then Mike McCarthy, once he became available, he was the backup plan if Ben Johnson fell through. That's the way I would view. Well, there were 17 candidates, but that's who I would view maybe the top three, although we never really got to that finalist stage.
Yeah, well, I'll have that piece out here in the next couple of days. You'll be able to, you can just hear it right there as we're talking about it, how much different that is and how much stronger that is compared to past cycles.
And that's the thing. Like sometimes there's some luck involved because the cycles are different with different candidates. This year, you had a Mike Vrabel. You had all these former head coaches who wanted to keep coaching. You had Ron Rivera, you had Pete Carroll, you had Mike McCarthy, and the list goes on and on. Brian Flores, former head coach. I just think this year's candidate pool felt deeper and better than years past, especially compared to 2022.
I would also say, too, that it's probably fair to say that this job was coveted more this year, too, than past coaching cycles. So it's kind of both of them work together. Anyway, we got Colton Pouncy, who covers the Lions for The Athletic, coming on here in about 5 or so minutes to talk about the fallout with the Lions, the assistants that have come over, Ben Johnson, all this stuff. Before we get to that, though, the coordinator hires were made, and I do want to make an announcement to everybody that we have already reached the point here on January 28th where we are no longer allowed to say anything negative about the Bears for the rest of the offseason. I learned that the hard way on Twitter because I had the gall, Johns, to question.
That's good use of that word. I like that word.
That Ben Johnson has never worked with any of his three coordinators, two of which I'm actually celebrating very much for hiring. But dare I bring up the point that it is slightly concerning that he just has never worked with these three guys before, because I do think that is an important thing. Never once suggested it won't work out. Just pointed that out, and I'm getting killed for it. So, such is the case. The Bears went from could do no right to do no wrong in a week. And that is, we know this from covering this team for as long as we have. That's how it goes in the offseason. And that's why we love the fans and everybody who watches and listens to the show, because you guys are that passionate.
What take has gotten you in the most trouble?
So it's interesting because I've talked a lot about this coaching project and the criteria I've gone with, and no one had a problem with the criteria at all until it questioned the Declan Doyle hire. It's not even really me doing it. It's months and months of research of successful coaching hires. And Declan Doyle checked none of the three boxes for hiring coordinators. Ben Johnson's never worked with him before. He's never been an offensive coordinator, and he's not being retained, which is sort of the third one that, can be thrown in there, which would be the case for Hightower, right? That's all. And I don't think it's that surprising. It's an out-of-the-box hire. Can we agree on that? You're hiring a 28-year-old tight ends coach who, by all accounts, talking to people in Denver and our colleagues from DNVR that do a great job covering the Broncos, like they were just as surprised about this as we were. That doesn't mean it's not going to work out, but it is an out-of-the-box hire. I don't think there's any arguing with that.
Has he been described as a rising star? Because there's a lot of rising stars at this time of year.
Well, I think by definition, if you're 28 years old and getting promoted in the NFL, you are a rising star.
Surprising star?
Surprising star. Why can't we just say rising coach? Why has he got to be a star?
Rising coach is like your rising senior in high school, the junior going into his senior year. I just think Ben Johnson wanted a young guy to grind the tape for him. I'll be honest. It's as simple as that. and it was going to be hard to find a veteran coach to handle that. Like, this is Ben Johnson's offense. He's going to be calling the plays. He needed an offensive coordinator who he described himself who was willing to take late nights and work with him. Enter a young coach without many responsibilities outside of football.
So the only thing I get confused about with that is like we start seeing staffs, and the Bears aren't the only one. There's very successful staffs that have structures like this. But when Antoine Randall L is the wide receivers coach and associate head coach, does he outrank the offensive coordinator?
I think so.
Which is fine. It just gets confusing. You know what I mean? And then you add in, which we haven't seen yet, right? We don't have any passing game coordinators or run
Not
game
yet.
coordinators yet. I would think that would be how it would be with, I mean, Antoine Randall L's got a hell of a lot more experience than Declan Doyle and has worked with Ben Johnson for a while now. So that trust that I've been talking about, that's a great thing that they have that between themselves. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. I also, Johns, don't think that you can just completely downplay the Declan Doyle hire as like, oh, he's just, doing some of the dirty work for Ben Johnson. He's the offensive coordinator for Caleb Williams. It's still a very important job inside that building.
He's going to go from the tight ends coach in Denver to having to talk to the Chicago media once a week during the season.
See, and that's the thing. If Antoine Randall L really outranks Declan Doyle, I want to talk to Antoine Randall L every week.
Instead, it's going to be every other week.
Right.
In a different setting. But that's just how the structure of the media schedule, the media obligations work for the Chicago Bears.
That's interesting.
I do like the Dennis Allen move. It kind of reminds me of, I know we could always reference things in the Bears past. I get it. But it's like retaining Vic Fangio, where Ben Johnson now can basically turn over the defense to a coach who has vast amounts of experience, a lot of success, was just a head coach, and he can trust him to run his defense for him, as opposed to trying to be this. He will be a CEO type head coach in a certain capacity, but doesn't have to be as thoroughly involved while he tries to build his offense. I like that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a little bit of a Chuck Pagano feel here. The guy who's been a head coach, defense coordinator, probably not the top tier of DCs in the league, but based on who's available, I mean, I think Ben Johnson did really well to hire Dennis Allen. I like the fit. You don't have to overhaul the roster on that side of the ball to make, to fit the scheme. And I think that honestly, some of the stuff that Dennis Allen does might fit some of these players even better than Matt Eberflus's defense did. The thing about the Bears defense last few years is like, I almost felt like some of these players were like stalling out in it because it wasn't creative enough at times. Like, I think Kyler Gordon can be used much better than he has been. Just for one example, if Jaquan Brisker can stay healthy, I think that's another guy. And I just don't know with like kind of the staleness of that system if they were always getting the most up out of it. So it's interesting with Dennis Allen. I think it's a good hire, and we can talk about Richard Hightower maybe a little bit on the back end of this. But with all the Lions connections, with all the movement, I think we need to check in with our guy Colton Pouncy, who covers the Lions for The Athletic. We bring him into the show right now. Colton, man, things change quickly, huh? Really, really fast. I'm sure you were thinking you might be covering a Super Bowl this year with the Lions, and then bam, all of a sudden on a Saturday night, things change for you guys. Things change for us very quickly here in Chicago too.
Yeah, no doubt. That was pretty abrupt ending there. I think a lot of people, like you said, mentioned, they thought they were going to New Orleans and booking their flights and everything, probably before the playoffs even started, only to see it end so quickly and then to see their coaches depart like 2 days later. So a lot going on over here. I'm sure a lot going on over there as well.
Colton, because I've seen some of it on social media, and sometimes that could be a bad gauge of of the truth of things, but like, what is the reaction to Ben Johnson leaving the Lions, but staying in the division and going so quickly?
Yeah, it's funny because obviously the Lions have two coordinators that became head coaches. So, Aaron Glenn's press conference with the Jets was yesterday or a couple days ago. I can't remember. Days are kind of blurry now. And he was, firing up the crowd over there. And a lot of Lions fans saw that and they're like, that's our guy, man. Like, we're going to miss you, AG. Like, go win a Super Bowl, just not when we do it. So it's kind of that vibe over there. And then you see Ben Johnson in Chicago. And over here, they're calling him Benedict Johnson. They got all these names for him. So they're not happy about it. And I think it really just comes down to like staying in the division. And honestly, I think a lot of Lions fans wanted to root for Ben. Like they probably wanted him to go to an AFC team so they can have like, a second team, I guess, over there. And because of what he did over here for so long, like they're obviously appreciative of what he's done. But they can't bring themselves to root for him when he's in the division. So I think they're a little upset, a little salty about it. But he made the best decision for him and his family and goes to a team that's really set up to win, in my opinion, kind of get this thing going early. And, he's going to try to get them there.
Yeah, I feel like the timing sort of aided that too. Like it was just so fast. It's like I saw a lot of that on Twitter too. It's like, man, like, that it really was. It was like not even 48 hours and the thing was done. So I think that was just, not that fans were going to get over the loss, but like they weren't even like close to getting over it at that time. So that probably didn't help. Let's start with the Lions side of this before maybe getting to the Bears side. I'm just, can you explain some of the part of that too? I think is I'm guessing Lions fans feel like maybe they can keep the momentum going a little bit more on the defensive side or maybe they're just a little bit more concerned about what's next offensively without Ben Johnson. Mm-hmm. So with where Jared Goff is, with what the weapons they have on that side of the ball, there's still plenty of talent. I guess, what do the Lions do next, and how much concern is there about the offense taking a significant dip now that Ben left?
Yeah, I think that was, part of the concern too. Whenever you lose Ben, and like they knew they're going to lose Ben for a while now. Like he's been interviewing for 3 cycles now and finally left after the 3rd time. But there is some sort of unknown when you lose a guy that talented and the guy that was, that revered as a play caller. You never know what happens next. But the Lions, they haven't announced it yet, but they are hiring John Morton, the Broncos passing game coordinator. He's been a long time coach in this league. So Morton was actually here in 2022, which was obviously Ben Johnson's first year as an OC. And Dan Campbell gives him a lot of credit for helping them get this offense on track and making it into what it looks like now. He worked with Ben Johnson. He worked with Lions passing game coordinator Tanner Angstrand, who a lot of people thought would take over for Ben, but ultimately didn't get the job, went to Morton. So Campbell really praises him, and they worked together in New Orleans as well. I think Morton was a receivers coach when Campbell was tight ends coach. So those two have a history. But Dan told us he wanted this offense to kind of look similar to what it's been, and he wanted a guy that can work well with Jared Goff, maximize the weapons that they have, and kind of keep the offense looking as similar as they could. So Morton, obviously having been here in 2022 and building this thing from the ground up, I guess, with Ben and some other guys on staff, like I think there's a level of comfort there. But it's always going to look a little bit different when you have a new guy in place and kind of he's putting his own, spin and twist on the offense. But that's kind of the direction they're headed in right now.
What do you make of Ben Johnson, his ability to get a couple coaches to leave Detroit for him, and Anton Randall L. and JT Barrett?
Yeah, I thought those were really excellent hires. Randall L. is probably one of the best position coaches on the Lions staff when he was here. Obviously everyone knows Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's developed into a star as a 4th-round pick. A lot of that, I think, is his own work ethic and just what he did to kind of grind his way to that spot. Not saying Randall L. doesn't deserve credit for that, but really the more impressive thing was his work with Jameson Williams, because Jameson, man, like when he got here, he was injured. He's a little hard-headed and a little stubborn, I think Campbell said a couple weeks ago. They really had to kind of develop him into an NFL receiver because he was just speed and, was getting by with that in college and high school. But when he got to the NFL, he had to, refine his route running, work on his hands. Like drops were an issue when he first got here. And Randall L. would spend pretty much like a couple of days after every training camp practice, like a week of training camp practice, just working with him on the drugs machine, working with him on technique. I did a story a couple of years ago where I followed around JMO for an entire day of training camp practice. And the number of times I saw Randall L. just like right by his side, right in his ear, giving him tips after a rep, after a drill, after a period, like it was evident. And so that guy is a real teacher. He's a really good communicator. And obviously, we saw the year JMO had this year, his first 1,000-yard season, and he missed 2 games via suspension. So I think Randall is an amazing position coach, and I think he's going to be really good in Chicago, and a really good fit as assistant head coach as well, because he's a guy that can command a room, kind of help Ben Johnson out in that area. And then JT Barrett, I mean, he's a guy that I think, if Mark Brunell had left, I know there's some rumors that he might have joined Aaron Glenn's staff. I don't think that's going to happen at this point. But if he had departed this offseason, I really think JT Barrett would have been next up. He was the assistant quarterbacks coach. I think he would have been an easy, choice to kind of take over that role. Smart guy. You always see him working after practice with Hendon Hooker as they try to develop him. Jared Goff's kind of mentioned how important he's been in terms of his own development and getting better as he got to Detroit. So those are 2 guys that are really communicators, different styles, right? Like Randall L's more like brash and loud in your face. JT Barrett's a little bit more on the quieter side, but I think both those guys obviously help the Lions and help the offense get to where it is.
Do you know anything about like what Dan Campbell's, I don't know if rules is the right word, but because there's only so much you can do to prevent assistants from moving on up, but like just like you said, they knew this was coming. They knew that Aaron Glenn might get a job too. It seems like he's sort of letting each one take like 1 or 2 assistants, but it also feels like, because I know there was talk about Hank Fraley. I'm not really sure what happened there, but it's certainly when you're losing a guy within your own division too, I got to think that there's a little bit of a resistance to be like, all right, man, Ben, we appreciate everything you did here, but please don't rate our staff at the same time.
Yeah, I almost feel like maybe there's a bit of an unwritten rule. Like maybe you get 1 position coach, and then if you want to hire someone like JT that was like a little bit lower in the totem pole, that's okay. I'm not really sure. Like I obviously think Ben and Dan are close, and maybe Ben just didn't want to, like you said, braid the staff. But I think getting JT and Randall L are 2 of the best hires he could have made in terms of bringing guys over. Obviously, a lot of people talk about Hank. I don't know if Hank really wanted to leave. I think his wife kind of put out a Facebook post saying, "We're staying like year 8, like we can't wait to be in Detroit." So I don't know if that, maybe the kids growing up and everything, you want to stick around a little bit longer. But yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. But I think Randall L and JT are 2 Ben guys and guys that will fit really well in Chicago, I think.
With Randall L, was it just a matter of the promotion and then coming home?
Right.
They had to be appealing as well.
I think so. Obviously, getting assistant head coach position is huge for him. I don't really know what he wants to be, if he wants to just continue being position coach or maybe an OC and work his way up to that track. But that's a good way to do it, right? Getting some assistant head coach experience and also coming home, like you mentioned, like that's got to be huge for him. And not like Detroit was far, but anytime you can, kind of be in the area that you grew up, I think that's what that would appeal to a lot of different people for sure.
Any surprise that like Mark Brunell, like right now as we're talking, right? He's still on Detroit staff. I thought him and Ben Johnson were close, but is this just a matter of, as Ken Adam was saying, like, well, Dan Campbell's probably like, no, sorry, it's not happening. I don't care if you're best friends in the Chicago anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The more coaches you take, I guess the more feathers you're going to ruffle in some ways. Yeah. But so I don't know if I don't know if Ben really wanted to do that. But as of now, Brunell's still here. It's funny because we were thinking about this. We were talking about this maybe a week ago, like how many coaches could leave from the staff. And if you set the over under at like 6, I think a lot of people still would have taken the over, because there are rumors that Brunell could join AG in New York, and Deshae Townsend, their DB's coach, was interviewing with the 49ers for their DC job. And like a lot of coaches were getting interest outside of Detroit. So, and we didn't even know what Hank Fraley was going to do at that point either. He was interviewing with Seattle, and, maybe we thought that he would go with Ben. So, I think all things considered, they did pretty well. Like if Ben's going to take 1 position coach and then assistant quarterbacks coach, I think you're okay with that. And we'll see who AG ends up taking. But as of now, I don't believe he's taking anyone. So, they're going to try to keep this thing as close as to what it looked like last year as possible. And it seems like they're coming out better than a lot of people thought in terms of that regard.
One more question about JT Barrett. How did he and Jared Goff kind of connect? Aren't they like almost the same age?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, JT might be younger than, if
I think
not,
he
they're
is.
the same age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think JT's still only like 30.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he was in New Orleans, I believe, for a little bit with like Sean Payton and Campbell and those guys. So I think he was more from that tree, and he came over here. But obviously, being assistant quarterbacks coach, he spent a lot of time with Ben Johnson. So I think, working with Brunell and Ben Johnson over there really gave him that kind of offensive feel and kind of probably adopted a lot of Ben's philosophy. So I think that's why he came over. But in terms of his work with Jared, I think he was more attached to Hendon. I think that was kind of his like pet project, is molding Hendon Hooker. So he's been here for 2 seasons now, and Hendon says he's gotten a lot better because of JT. And I'm sure JT was able to lend an ear to Jared as well. But I think Jared and Brunell are a little bit closer just because of that age gap. But I'm sure JT kind of helped out Jared along the way as well.
Yeah. So Goff is a few months older than
Just a
JT
few months.
Barrett.
Wow.
Yeah, just a few months. It's kind of crazy. So what's the vibe with the Lions right now? I mean, I think it's a fair question to ask if they kind of missed a window here. Do they need to, just with the amount of they're losing on the coaching staff, doesn't mean they can't rebound. They still got a talented roster, but just what's the vibe right now in terms of how important this year was to kind of take advantage of the 1 seed, what they earned, seemingly being the best team in the NFC all year, and then just having that shut so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a bit of a letdown. Anytime you're the 1 seed and you lose your first playoff game, I mean, there's no other way to feel but to be disappointed. I look at kind of the season as a whole, right? And they did so much. They, won the division again for the 2nd consecutive year. This is the first time they've won 10 games in back-to-back seasons in franchise history. So that's pretty remarkable. Going 15-2 with all the injuries, I think kind of was a testament to the coaching that they had in place. And it's no surprise that, 2 of the coordinators became head coaches. But moving forward, I think they'll be excited to get some players back from injury because, when you lose Nathan Hutchinson, Marcus Davenport, Derek Barnes, Carlton Davis, Lee McNeil, like your defense is basically a practice squad level defense at that point. And like we kind of saw it in that playoff game, Jaden Daniels lit them up for the offense scored 38 and there was a pick 6. So it got to 45 ultimately. But I mean, we knew that they were going to have to win a shootout in the playoffs, just the way their defense was. And they lost a shootout. 5 turnovers doesn't help. A lot of people are kind of blaming Ben Johnson for that, saying that he was not prepared because he was interviewing for all these jobs. And I think that's kind of some BS because they still put up 500 yards of offense and 31 points. Like that should be enough to win you most games, right? It's just the defense was at a place where they couldn't really get stops when they needed to, and the offense still turned the ball over 5 times. You're not going to win too many games when you turn over 5 times. So, some disappointment for sure with how the year ended. But I also think this is an opportunity for Dan Campbell to kind of prove some people wrong. And a lot of people say he was so coordinator dependent. But I actually think he can end up being like a Mike Tomlin or a John Harbaugh level coach where you're going to have some turnover, but things remain the same because 1, you have a good front office that can continue to identify talent, and 2, you got a head coach that guys continue to rally around no matter who's next to him. So this is really the first time we'll see him without these coordinators in this role like this. So I think there's a level of excitement going forward and maybe a chance to kind of reshape some things. But definitely some unknown, right? Like you don't really know what's going to look like. Schedule is going to be pretty hard. I think they're playing 7 2024 playoff teams on the road of their 9 road games this year. So maybe a bit of a step back as they kind of work through some kinks. And they hired Kelvin Shepard, who's going to be a first-time defensive coordinator, to take over for Aaron Glenn. So there might be some road bumps along the way. Maybe you don't win 15 games, but if you're still competitive and you're still give yourself a chance to win the division in December, I think that's all you can ask for, and hope to set yourself up for some playoff success.
How do you think the Lions benefited from having, their head coach, former player, the defensive coordinator, former player, Antoine Randall, former player, JT Barrett, former player. I mean, played some awesome football at Ohio State. Mark Brunell, like the greatest Jaguar of all time. Like, how did they benefit? How did they gain so much from all of that experience?
I really think it was beneficial in those early years when they're 3-13-1 and start 0-10 and losing all these games. And they could have lost the locker room back then. Even 2022, they started off 1-6. So they really could have lost the locker room and lost the attention of a lot of their players, and that could have snowballed. And all of a sudden, Dan Campbell's out of a job. But I think the fact that all these guys are former players and the fact that they've seen a lot of things in this league, they're able to tell pretty much a young roster that, hey guys, like we've been here before. We've all seen this in this league. Turnarounds can happen quickly. Just have faith in us. We're on the right track. We see the development. We see the growth. Just stick with us. And really, that was the message all throughout that second season, 2022. That was my first year on the beat. And they're 1-6. And a lot of people in Detroit media are like, is this the guy? Like, should we start firing up the hot seat rumors and things like that? And then the owner, Sheila Ham, she spoke to us mid-season and said, hey, we still have belief in Dan Campbell. He's the right guy. We chose him for a reason. He's going to get us out of this. So I think that message was unified from top to bottom, and all like you couldn't help but kind of buy into the message that they were giving if you're a player. Especially with coaches that have kind of been there and done that. They had Deuce Staley, Randall L., Brunell, Kelvin Shepard. Aaron Glenn was a first-round cornerback. Like you look across the board, they have all these players that have played in the league for a decade plus, and if they're telling you this is what we have to do to kind of be where we want to be, where we want to be, and go where we want to go, you can't help but kind of buy into that message. And they did, and end up winning 8 of their final 10 games in that second season, and kind of started that trajectory that they're on now.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Certainly the Bears-Lions rivalry gets a little bit of a kick here.
I'm excited. Yeah.
It's going to be fun.
Is your family excited about the hire?
They didn't know how to feel. So they definitely, my dad called me and we had a conversation. I think he felt better after that. I was like, yo, Ben's a really good coach, man. Obviously there's you never know when there's a first time OC transitioning to head coach. You can either be Mark Trestman or you can be a McVay Shanahan type. And I think he's closer to that than the latter. So the former, I should say. So that's kind of what you're hoping for. He was a little concerned, but he's like, all right, if you say he's good, I'm gonna trust it. So I think he's on board.
Well, now he's gonna hold it against you.
I know. Yeah. Now that's gonna happen for sure.
Yeah. If this is your first time hearing Colton on our show, he's from the Chicago area. So a little bit of a connection there with the family as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to this. He's Ben Johnson going up against Dan Campbell twice a year. Should be fun. And hopefully the Bears make a jump. Otherwise, it won't matter. You got to have both teams be good for it to be a rivalry. But it should be fun, Colt. We always appreciate you jumping on with us. So thanks for coming on again.
Absolutely. I'll see you guys in Detroit for Thanksgiving.
Oh, come on.
Damn it, he's probably right.
Probably right. Looking forward to some creative Benedict Johnson signs and more when he returns to Detroit.
See, I don't hate that happened because it adds to the fun of it. Lions fans are mad about it. Good. It'll be fun when they go back.
The idea that he was like throwing the game or wasn't working as hard on the game is completely like bizarre to me, considering the yardage they put up, the points they still put up. The injuries just got to the Lions. It's it.
Look, are you slightly distracted a little bit? Yeah. I mean, you can't say that there's not conversations happening here and there with your agent, or, certainly anybody who's married knows you go home and you talk to your wife about, hey, where are we going to live if we get this job versus this? Like, it's human nature. That doesn't mean he wasn't prepared. And from what we heard, what Ben told us about the process, like, remember that interview happened on a Saturday. They had the bye week, and he and Aaron Glenn specifically blocked off that Saturday when nobody else was. They were off. The coaches were off. The Lions weren't doing anything that day.
The Lions gave them conference rooms to run their interviews.
Right. So they go in these conference rooms for like 9 hours because he did 3 hours. So it's probably even longer than that. You had 3-hour interview. Although the Jacksonville one might have lasted 5 minutes for all we know.
Well, hi, Trent. I don't know what's wrong with my connection. Let me try this again.
Yeah, this isn't working. So, and then that was still a week. That was a week before the game actually happened. So yeah, and plus the results weren't that bad. Was it the Lions' best game of the season? No, but they still had a pretty damn good offensive performance. It's just fans being upset. That's fine.
It's
good.
the
Like I said,
aspect.
It'll make the rivalry more fun. Hopefully it is a rivalry.
I think if you hear Ben Johnson talk about wanting to stay in the division too, it also enhances it. Like in terms of, beating Matt LaFleur twice a year. I want to stay in this division. There's a lot of fuel that Ben Johnson added himself to this fire.
Yeah.
And I like it.
Let's do some quick hitters before we get out of here. Just quick reactions on a number of different coaching moves. One is Bears retaining Richard Hightower. Your thoughts on that?
Good move. I like it. I thought the advanced numbers work in Richard Hightower's favor. I think the players like playing for him. Yes, there was a couple of major hiccups this season, especially when it came to that blocked field goal. But I think by the end of the day, things got addressed, and he's one of the better special teams coordinators in the league.
Yeah, I also think having somebody on the staff coming over from the past staff is a good thing, especially a coach that has worked with the entire roster, knows the players, knows how to push buttons with certain players. That just like Dennis Allen coming in with his head coaching experience, Richard Hightower's experience with this roster, and also understanding. I'm sure he has some strong opinions about what went wrong the last few years, and how to improve that. So I think it's a good blend of coaches. You got enough experience coming in with Dennis Allen, enough guys that have worked with Ben Johnson before, with Antoine Randall, JT Barrett, and then at least one big time coach in Richard Hightower who is being retained. Now there could be a few others. My understanding is, like, don't be surprised if Jim Dre, the tight ends coach, sticks around. I think there's some crossover there in terms of specifically some run game philosophy, from what I understand. I don't know that for sure if he's coming back, but I believe he's still, as of right now, still employed by the Bears. So that's one. And then there might be a few other ones. I think I saw Borgonzi's name out there, the linebackers coach. So we'll see. A lot of that stuff happens Senior Bowl week. A lot of networking that goes on down there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Allen brought some guys from the Saints with him as well.
True.
To fill out his staff.
Yeah. So we'll see how that all plays out. Matt Eberflus, defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys.
Eberflus is back. That makes we have a revenge game to circle, because the Cowboys are coming to town next year, right? Yes, they're coming here. We're not going there. Correct.
Yeah, correct. They are coming to Soldier Field. I feel like that happens a lot.
I feel like you and I have been consistent with this. Very good defensive coordinator, very much learning his way as a head coach. And then once things went sideways with his offense, that was it for Flus. But I think you and I have always agreed, there'll be a couple play calls that he doesn't like. There's a couple that stand out in my memory, but I always thought he was a very good defensive coordinator. Not surprised at all that he got another job this fast.
Yeah, good, not great DC, and not a head coach. And he's a good fit for Dallas too. He knows that right players. He's been there. Obviously, he spent, I think, 7 or 8 years as linebackers coach there. I think it's a good hire for Dallas. And it also doesn't shock me at all that he's not taking a year off. I think that man was built to coach football.
Yes. Yeah.
He could have played plenty of golf and got paid a lot of money.
He can still play plenty of golf.
But he seems to find a way to play plenty of golf anyway. So I think he's going to be just fine. Not surprised Flus is coaching, and I think it's a good hire for Dallas. I feel like there was one more.
I got one for you. Did you see Liam Cohen's lobby video with the Jacksonville Jaguars?
I have not seen it. I know there's some. I was getting tagged in some Liam Cohen stuff. I was too busy last night. I didn't get. I know there was a. Doesn't he have a hits principle situation going on too?
Yeah, there's something like that going
fast.
on.
People were. I'm sorry, guys. Maybe I'll get that turned around by Thursday. I know people were tagging us because I think they wanted us to add it to the soundboard. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but it looks. What a disaster! That's what it just looks like a disaster.
What a power play that he made! Absolute power play. I think there was some surprise, at least on my end, that he wasn't included in the Bears interview list. But the Bears did interview him last year as part of their coordinator search. So maybe Ryan Poles didn't like the information that he had at that point, or just didn't feel like Liam Cohen was ready. But just in terms of the lobby videos, if you were going to give awards, like Ben Johnson gets one for his lobby video at Hallis Hall. In Jacksonville, there was like one person there to greet some lady coming out of a hallway to greet Liam Cohen, and that was it.
He was like ready to give a speech, and there's one person there.
No, like Ben Johnson had people on a balcony. There's not even a balcony in here.
All right, good job, Bears. You won the lobby video.
Yes.
didn't know that. I didn't even know there was a new trend until maybe the Bears created it. I saw the Raiders had something similar with Pete Carroll. I don't think it was a whole lobby, but they did show him kind of walking. I think that was a good hire for the Raiders, by the way. I think a good. I'll say it's a good pivot once they didn't get Ben Johnson.
Well, it's
Pete
an
Carroll brings
experienced candidate that will clean up a lot of your own mess for you.
They
with a
needed
big
somebody else.
smile on his face while he's doing it.
I don't think he's going to win a Super Bowl there. I don't even think he's going to win the West there. But, yeah. All right. Thoughts on the Super Bowl matchup?
I can't believe I was really kind of rooting for the Buffalo Bills. That's my one thought. My whole family was actually kind of rooting for the Buffalo Bills for some reason. Like everybody, from me to my wife to my sons.
I'm surprised your boys weren't rooting for the Chiefs. Like, because it just seems like James and my nephew were here, and they're just like they're caught up in the Chiefs and the Mahomes, and they're just like. So I'm good for your boys rooting for the Bills, because I was rooting for the Bills. I'm like, come on, man.
I want to watch a different
Buffalo
team.
Yeah, well, there's that, but also like I just feel bad for Buffalo. Like the fans deserve it. I would say the same thing about the Lions. Like if they had been playing in the NFC Championship. That being said, now that we do have this matchup, it's a great matchup. I'm excited for it.
I'm excited to see what Saquon Barkley can do against that great Chiefs defense. I mean, that offensive line for the Eagles just creates these massive holes, and it'll be a fun matchup to watch.
Well, I've been thinking about it a couple different ways, because I feel like the Eagles roster top to bottom is probably better. Now, obviously, the Chiefs have Mahomes and they have Andy Reid, and so you're probably giving them the edge there. But these guys played an awesome Super Bowl 2 years ago, and Saquon Barkley wasn't in that game.
No.
And I'm just trying to think of like how different it could have been if you had Saquon in the mix.
Yeah, I just felt like watching the Bills that they didn't have enough. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
well, that was kind of the whole season. I think people forgot the storyline with the Bills coming in is they traded away Stephon Diggs. Their whole strategy this year was like addition by subtraction. This was kind of supposed to be a reset year for them. Yeah. Not like they were going to be bad, but just they didn't necessarily have the same hype as the last couple seasons. And it just seemed like, and that's part of the reason why I've been supporting Josh Allen's MVP candidacy, because it's like I really feel like he willed them more to victory this year than past years because of that.
Yeah. And I think that applies to both sides of the roster. Yeah. I think we've seen stronger Buffalo Bills rosters, but this year Josh Allen became a better quarterback, took his game to another level. And this is the run they got.
Yeah. Now, I know they are in the red when it comes to the salary cap, so I don't know how much they're going to be able to, but you can always maneuver that and stuff. So they'll find a way.
You got to draft well.
Yeah. And maybe stop trading your first round picks to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
Just
don't do that.
Maybe just think about that a little bit.
You know what? A great offseason? Howie Roseman. Just talking about, roster maneuvering, salary cap, drafting. He drafted 2 Rookie of the Year candidates for his secondary. He signed Zach Bond, Defensive Player of the Year candidate at linebacker, and he signed Saquon Barkley, an MVP candidate at running back. It's a great offseason by a general manager right there.
Oh, without doubt. And how they've been able to turn over that O-line. A lot of things you can learn from the Eagles. And I hope that one of the things the Bears change here with that in mind is when they get presented with the next Jalen Carter or the next Saquon Barkley, for different reasons, guys that other teams were afraid to pull the trigger on. Barkley obviously had more to do with the money. Just take note that the teams like the Chiefs and the Eagles pounce in those moments, because you need great players. So the next time that opportunity comes around, look at what Howie Roseman's done. Look at what the Chiefs always do. And yes, a lot of it's coaching, a lot of it's fit, and all that's true. But I just think the Bears can do what you did with Ben Johnson, right? When an opportunity like that all of a sudden falls into your lap, just be aggressive and get it done. Start doing that with the roster a little bit more. Not saying you need to go into cap hell and all that. You got to be selective about it. But there's going to be an opportunity here, maybe even this offseason, to go get somebody special. And you got to have all pros on your roster somewhere.
Yeah. I feel like the Ravens and the Steelers always get the praise and the compliments when it comes to their roster construction. And maybe it has something to do because they got these outstanding Hall of Fame head coaches. But the Eagles deserve, I think, just as much credit. I mean, just look at their past 10 years. There's a Super Bowl in there. There's a lot of playoff wins. There's a lot of winning seasons. Always have some of the best offensive linemen in the league. They just keep going and keep going.
And they've done it with different coaching staffs, too.
Yes, yeah.
Doug Peterson won the Super Bowl, and then they were like, yeah, we're good. Okay, we're good. And then they brought in Sirianni. And Sirianni, even as of like week 3 this year, was getting criticized for stuff. So, and he's going to a second Super Bowl now in 4 years. Lot to be learned from those two franchises. That's, not a hot take or anything, obviously. See what the Bears can do. Maybe Ben Johnson will lead the way. At least that's the hope. Thanks to Colton Pouncy for jumping on with us again. Make sure you're checking his stuff out on the Lions in the Athletic, and you can follow him on Twitter at Colton_Pouncy. Thanks to Katie Langen, our producer. We will be back on Thursday, and I think we'll bring a little bit more about Dennis Allen to the table. Larry Holder is going to join us from down there in New Orleans. And then I'm going to New Orleans.
Hang out with Larry.
I will. I'm going to eat a lot of good food next week is what I'm going to do. That's the plan.
Can I give you some pro advice, though? Pro tip. Do not schedule your yearly checkup the day you get back from New Orleans.
When those cholesterol numbers go a little high.
I did that after, who was down there? It was John Harbaugh and Jim Harbaugh. I covered that Super Bowl in New Orleans.
Oh, yeah.
And that Tuesday, I think it might have been like my 35th, 30th. I was younger. But everything was through the roof. The triglycerides, the cholesterol. I'm like, oh, God.
Your doctor's
blood pressure.
What's going on here? Like Mardi Gras, man.
Man, I was just on Bourbon Street for a week.
Well, surprisingly, there's not a lot of time to play during Super Bowl week for us. We're going long days all day long, tons of interviews, and we're gonna have another big week there for you on CHGO. So check it out. But before we get to that point, we'll be back here on Hoge and Jahns on Thursday. A lot more to talk about from the coaching perspective. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can follow us on Twitter at Adam Hoge, at Adam Jahns. Read Johnsy in the Athletic. You can read me at allchgo.com. Check out all of our merch, hogeandjahns.com. It's all there for you. Talk to you a little bit later on in the week.
See ya.